Actually, should we fill out this first, or do you think we can do that in the end of the video?
We'll do it at the end. No problem.
Good on?
Yes.
Delete that.
It's fun. It's about
Okay.
5 seconds.
This video is part of the Oral History Project of Edmonds Museum and the Edmonds WWII High School History Club. The museum will keep a copy of this recording for the purpose of historical research. And we thank the participants who are ready here today. Okay? I'd like to start off by asking, what is your name and where were you given at birth?
My name, excuse me, my name is Crisse Bennett. And my name given to me at birth was Clarice Louise Golder was my maiden name. Excuse me.
Okay, and how did you come to get this name?
Okay, junior high came along and I was going to go to a summer camp with all my friends. And everybody had a nickname. And Clarice, I've never known anybody else whose name was Clarice. And it was just too long and too complicated. I wanted this name like Betty Sue or Mary Jo or something like that. And so I decided I would just shorten my name. And my name is Clarice, C-L-A-R-I-S-S-E, which my mother gave me because her brother's name was Claire. And he died when he was young. And she loved him. And so she named him after him, thinking that I would be called Claire as a nickname. Well, when I was little, I found out that I was named for a boy who had died, and his name was Claire. I didn't want anything to do with the name Claire.
Yeah.
So she was the only one who called me Claire from then on, and I decided I would make my name shorter. And so my name is C-L-A-R-I-S-S-E. And then I take the L and the A out, and I get Crisse, C-R-I-S-S-E. So that's where I got the Crisse. And it stuck with me all these years. And of course, some people see it and they say, "Oh, you're Crissy." And I said, "No, it's just pronounced Crisse."
I guess now would be Grandma Crisse. Wouldn't it?
Yeah, Grandma Crisse.
All right.
I'm Grandma Crisse.
Okay, where were you born?
I was born in Brockton, Massachusetts. But I'm from the Pacific Northwest my whole life, and all my relatives lived in the Pacific Northwest, in Tacoma and principally, and I lived in Spokane for a while. I lived in Pullman, Washington, and Moscow, Idaho. So Pacific Northwest is my home.
Was that your original?
So when I was little, my dad was in Boston because he and my grandma were there because he was going to a theological seminary at Boston University. And when he finished, they wanted to come home, which means the Pacific Northwest. So they put me in a car and traveled across the United States. Took them 4 tires because they'd only last so long and then they would just disintegrate.
Oh, wow.
And they'd have to get some new tires. And I was the baby that came with them. And they dried my diapers at bus stops, or they would wash out my diapers in the gas station bathroom. And then they would put them in the window. They'd roll the window up and let them. So when they drive along, they would flutter in the breeze, and that's how they dried out my diapers. And so they said my diapers, they flipped me across the United States. Took them days and days, and as I say, in those days traveling, your tires didn't last that long.
What was that time frame, would you say?
So, well, let's see, I was born in 1929, so that was like maybe 1927, 1928.
Wow.
And so that was my first experience, because I was born in Massachusetts, but I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, in Tacoma and Spokane, Pullman, Washington, and Moscow, Idaho, and here in Edmonds. And my husband was through law school in California. We went down to California for him to go to law school. He graduated from Washington State, everybody in my family, all my kids, everybody's gone to Washington State. He graduated there, and then the day after he graduated, we got married, and we drove to California because he was going to go to law school at Hastings Law School, which is in San Francisco. So that's how we started out our married life and his journey in becoming an attorney, because went to law school then, and then we came back home when we were finished with law school. We came back to the Pacific Northwest in Seattle.
So how did you exactly meet your husband?
I met him at a wedding reception. My father was a Methodist minister,
Oh.
and one June afternoon in the summer, beginning of summer, my sister said, you know, what are we going to do today? And I said, well, Dad's having a wedding over at the church, which was right next door. And I saw the people coming. Why don't we go over and sit in on the wedding? We did do this to entertain ourselves. So we went over and sat at the wedding, and there were some really good-looking boys sitting in the row behind us.
Yeah.
So when we got through with the wedding was over, there was a reception. And I said, let's go to the reception downstairs. Did you see those cute boys that were sitting behind us? So we went down and started to talk to these boys. And they said, do you happen to know where the new groom, do you know where his family or her family lived here in Moscow, Idaho, where it lived at the time? Because we want to find the car to decorate it up, you know, we're just married, and put stuff on tin cans to drag and everything. And I said, oh, yeah, I knew where they lived. So would you take us up there? I think their car's parked up there. We want to decorate it. So I went up there, and these two boys, just two college boys, they were going to WSU, were the ones that were doing this. And that's how it happened that one of the boys was the guy I started dating that summer, and he was in Pullman, and I lived in Moscow, Idaho, where the wedding was. It's only 11 miles apart. So, as he said, he started going with me because I was the only girl around. With school, WSU, school was out for the summer. Everybody had left and going home for the summer. And he was staying around. He was doing some carpentry work for a job there on the campus. And he remembered having met this girl over in Moscow. So he came over one Saturday, and I was working in a department store there. And I saw him, and he said, remember me? I said, yeah. What are you doing? Do they let you come out for have coffee or something? And I said, yeah. Well, let's go have coffee. So we went for coffee, and then we had a date that night. And that's how so we went together all summer. And people would say, well, how did you meet? Well, I was the only girl around. So he had to take me out if he wanted to do something. So anyhow, we started, and we went together all summer. And at the end of the summer, he decided that he wanted to go back east to Washington, D.C. He wanted to see all the sites, the Capitol and what was going on and all the historic places, now that he'd finished school. And so he was to hitchhike his way back there. And then he started writing me letters about where he was, all the trip across, and the people he met along the way, and how it was in Washington, D.C. And then when he was through, he said, I know that your family has boys in your basement who are going to WSU studying for something or other, and could I come, because it's vacant, and then could I come because I have one paper I have to write that I never did when I graduated, that I was due to turn in, and I never have turned it in. Can I come over and live there in your basement until I write this paper? Well, I thought that would be cool. So my parents said, sure. They liked him very much. So he came over, and he lived in our basement for 2 months. It was supposed to be a couple weeks. He ended up being there for 2 months. And we started going out all the time. And then my mother said, well, you've got to eat somewhere. And so she cooked dinner. And so he really moved right in off the bat.
Well, what kind of fun activities did you guys used to do back then?
Oh, yeah. Well,
around that time?
Yeah, well, around that time, we enjoyed the outdoors and camping and we didn't, we mountain climbed. We didn't climb the mountains. We went hiking and go to state parks and camp out and stuff like that. My family we were always outdoor people.
Perks of living in Washington.
So
Yeah.
living in Washington, and Chris, we knew every of the national parks, and we knew Mount Rainier, and then we'd go up north to Canada and the mountains over. There's mountains every place to climb. So for every week we were someplace, the whole family. We just camped out and cooked over an open fire. In those days, we didn't have all the exotic things they take when they go camping.
Yeah.
We just camped over with a grill over an open fire. Anyway, we enjoyed the outdoors, and we've been to all the state parks and places like that. So he was always with us all that whole summer, and we went everywhere and down into Oregon too.
So you must have traveled a lot.
Yeah,
places.
we travel. We'd pack up. My dad would, after we were married, and we camped with all the time, he would call us, my dad would call us from the office and say that the weather looked good. Pack up, we're leaving when I get through the office. And so he would take off, and we knew exactly everybody knew what they were supposed to take, and we'd just leave.
Yeah.
And that's what we did all the time. And after we were married and had all the kids, we took them up there when they were babies. They didn't like a tent, so we put them in the front seat of the car and strapped them up there, and they pretended like they were driving, and they were happy as a client would go to sleep. So we've always been outdoor campers and hikers. So we know the Pacific Northwest well and love it. There's no place like it.
Have you visited any places outside this country?
When I was a professional artist for 40 years.
Oh, that was your career.
Watercolor, yes. And on the first time I had a tent at the Edmonds Arts Festival and sold all my work. Some of my work is around here.
Wow.
I sold so
Mind
much.
if we
Oh, go
get
ahead.
that on camera?
That's fine.
Would you say that?
Yes, I did
Okay.
that. I don't have too many pictures around, but I sold them, so I don't have much left. This one over here in the corner is me. Someone took a picture of me, and then from the picture I made that picture of me in the Pike Place Market looking at flowers. Anyway, I painted and sold my work, and the first year, and I sold so much at the art festival, I've had all this money, and I thought, what am I going to do? I thought, I'm going to Europe. So I took the money that I made from that one weekend arts festival. I think I made over $500. That selling stuff.
Wow.
And so I got some friends who would go with me, and we went to Europe, England, and then to France. Took the train down to Italy, and went down the whole length of Italy and back up. But I wanted to go to Italy because all the art that I had studied and everything, a lot of the artists had come from that area and written books and did things. So I wanted to see what it was like. So we were gone for, I think, 8 days, and had a wonderful time on the money that I made from my first big showing, and it was great. So I've painted forever, it seemed like, and that's what I did. That was my career.
How did you get to that point in your life?
Well, I was an art major in college, but I was always an artist from the time I was old enough to hold a pencil. I was drawing all the time. And then in school, I was always, no matter where I went, I was always the school artist. When anybody had to have signs, or they had to have this, or the backdrop for a play, they wanted me to paint it. All that sort of thing. So I was always doing artwork.
Crisse.
So I went to college and became an art major, and graduated as an art major. But I just started, painting. Someone would say, well, sketch a portrait of my daughter or something, and I'd do that. And then one thing led to another, and then at one art festival, and I made so much money, I thought, that's what I'm going to do the rest of my life. So I did. I painted, and I belonged to a gallery, and down in Edmonds. It was for artists. You could belong. It was a gallery that was run by the artists themselves, and so I took turns working in the gallery, selling stuff. And I did that, And I was in the arts festival for years. I made the poster for 1 year is on the wall as you come in.
Mm-hmm.
There's a poster for the art festival, and I did that 1 year. And then other things over the years. This picture over my head was when right here, that is in Paris, the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, when I went down the avenue and you go under this arch,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's when that trip, my first trip with the money I made, when I went to Europe, was one of the first places I went. One day I sat there on this bench, Charles de Gaulle Place it's called, and I made a sketch sitting there one morning, and when I got home from that sketch I made that little painting. So that was my first trip to Europe and the continent, and going to all the places that I wanted to see. And I took all kinds of pictures, and then when I got home from the pictures, I made a lot of paintings and sold a lot of them.
I gotta say, it looks just like the movies.
Yeah. It was a marvelous time. It was really fun that I earned the money so that I could go to Europe and all the places that I'd studied about all those years, because I was an art major. And I went on a scholarship back to Oberlin, Ohio. You know where Oberlin is? It's a very good school. It's like those schools like Harvard and Princeton, except this was a smaller school.
Okay.
It's the first school in the United States to allow women, and the first school in the United States to have blacks. So it's quite an outstanding, it has quite a reputation. So I got a scholarship and I went there, and for my years of studying art, and you know, I studied in the school and graduated, but I was an art major, but I studied everything else too, you know, that you do when you go to college. I loved it. So anyway, it put me on my track. After I got married, I just kept painting, and so that was my job all those years. And the kids would come home from school, and they'd come down. They'd know that they could see me standing there hunched over my watercolor. I did just watercolor over painting, and then they'd come back, Mom, can I go to the movies tonight? Okay, whatever. They could, because my mind was someplace else, and they knew that. Mom, I think I'm going to get married tomorrow. Is it okay? Sure, go ahead. And they would do all kinds of things. They knew that it wasn't registering mentally. I was in another world. I was painting.
Yeah.
But anyway, for all those years, I painted. Well, I started when the kids were babies, and painting time was nap time for the babies. When they were asleep, 2.5 hours. So that's why I did watercolor, because I could put it away, like you know, and everything. I wouldn't have messy oils or charcoal or whatever. I had a watercolor paper. You can just roll it up and put it away, or throw it away, or paint the back side of it. But that's why I did watercolor. It was easy, so I never spent more than 2.5 hours ever on a painting. That was it. If it worked, okay. If it didn't, turn it over or throw it away.
Yeah.
So these are the few things that I've kept. But anyway, it was a wonderful outlet. And I was in another world painting mentally, and the kids knew it, so they got away with murder. I don't know what all they did when I was painting, but
You have any crazy kids about the stories? Mr. Bennett in particular.
oh yeah, probably. Well, Mr. Bennett, this Jeff, he was number one baby. I had 6, and he was the first.
Mm-hmm.
So 5 boys and 1 girl, and it was great. And I lived in the Pacific Northwest in Moscow, Idaho, is where I lived most of my life, and that's where
With the children.
yeah, and that's where I had my kids.
What would you say, how did being a parent just alter your perspective on life?
Oh, I loved it. I've had a wonderful life. I have been very, very blessed. I've been fortunate, and I've never had any serious illnesses. I've never had any tragic things happen to me. In fact, I suppose people can grow when they have tough times,
Mm-hmm.
and I never had any. And I've always felt a little bit guilty that everything was so wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
I had a great family. My father was a Methodist minister, and then I had a sister who was 2 years younger, and then I had a brother, that stupid little brother, who was always in the way. There's my sister and I who got along fine. And then years later, we had this baby brother. It was a little surprise package.
Always the brother.
Oh, and it drove us crazy. But anyway, he grew up to be fine. But anyway, we blamed everything on him. So I had a wonderful life, and I enjoyed school, and I always did all the artwork for everything they ever had at schools. And then I went to college, got a scholarship, and I went back to Oberlin, Ohio for I went there 2 years. I went to the University of Idaho for 1 year, my senior year, because I knew it was too expensive for my folks to afford just on my scholarship. So I came home and stayed in my hometown and went to the University of Idaho, and that's where I graduated. And so, and then I met my husband, who was going to WSU, and we met at a wedding that my father had, and we met afterwards, and then we went all that together all that summer. And that's led to us, we decided to get married, and then he decided he wanted to be a lawyer, and so we drove to California in a funny little car, and had a wonderful trip going down there. And then he went to law school. He went to Hastings Law School in San Francisco.
How was that career path for him?
And he just loved it. And he became a lawyer, and he came back. But we came home. Home was Pacific Northwest. We came back, and I had an aunt and uncle who lived in the town here, Edmonds. So I said, well, go there, because they had a summer house on the water. I said, maybe they're not there this summer. This was in fall when school was out. Maybe they'll just stay in their cabin until we look around and find out where we're going to live. So we did, and that's how we happened to come to Edmonds. And we loved Edmonds and the water and everything, and so he went to law school before, you see, and then he went down the street in Edmonds, and he saw this office, Holte Hall, and he went in and said, I just finished law school and I haven't taken the bar yet, but could I work for you, running errands or just doing stuff for you while I take the bar? You know, and they said, sure. So he did. And we lived in a little house there in the corner of 196th and Edmonds Way, and in a little house that lived in the middle of an orchard. And that's where we started, and we never left Edmonds.
Sorry to interrupt. We have about 10 minutes left on the recording.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I say you live a pretty comfortable life. Would you say any world
Very.
changes happen around your
No.
time? Anything dramatic?
No, this is the
Wars.
ordinary thing. There's a war, and my dad, when the war happened, I know that it scared me to death. I was in junior high, and I remember hearing about it on the radio, about the bombing. I thought it was awful what was going to happen, and my father, who was a minister, he decided that he saw a lot of the people in the neighborhood being drafted and going to war, and he said, I got to go to. So he became a chaplain, and he went to the South Pacific as a chaplain.
Oh, wow.
So I used to get his letters all the time and everything, and he was there for 2.5 years altogether, came home.
Any stories he has on?
And, well, it was something. He went to an island there, Kwajalein, and his job was to go on the islands after they had taken them from the Japanese. And then his job was to bury all the dead.
Oh, wow.
Because they didn't have time. They had to move over to the next island, you
That must
see.
be dramatic.
And it was. And so he made cemeteries on these islands and buried the young boys that he'd taken care of. It changed him tremendously. He went in as my handsome dad, tall, dark hair, black hair, with a one white streak through his hair, which I thought was so cool.
Yeah.
And when he came back, he'd lost about 50 pounds. He was tall and very thin and very tan from living on in the Pacific, South Pacific, and his hair had turned white totally.
Wow.
I didn't know who he was at first. It was really spooky to get to know him. But he said it was the heat and the stress that he was under as a chaplain over there. And his hair, you see, was starting to turn white. But he said it was the combination of the stress and the heat. He came back and was tall and handsome as could be, but his hair was totally white.
Wow.
It was an interesting experience, but he learned a lot from that horrific experience of being in the South Pacific during the war. So that's how I knew about the war, because my family was part of it. So that was mainly it. So anyhow, otherwise I've had a very good, charmed life, I think. I have been happy. I had a good marriage, raised 6 kids who, I don't know if they're geniuses at all, but I always like to think about it. And I've got, out of my 6 kids, my one girl died. That was too bad.
Wow.
She got cancer and they couldn't find where it was, and before they had anything to help her, she died. So that was probably the most traumatic thing to all of us, because her 5 brothers just loved her.
Yeah,
And
cancer
she was
is
the
really-
captain. She was the captain. I go away and Leslie was in charge of the household, because when she said to do this or do that, they did it. Anyway, she was a lovely girl, and she worked as a real estate agent. Loved it. Was married, had one little girl, and my granddaughter, she lives around in the area. But that was the most traumatic thing, was having her die. And then my husband, he died, but it was a good way to go. He just went out. He was working in the office, walked down the stairs and collapsed, and had that's what you call it, a brain aneurysm. Went to his brain and he just blacked out, and that was it. The best way to go, believe
Wow.
me. Hadn't been ill or anything. If you're gonna go, what a great way to go.
Yeah.
And he would have been a miserable patient. I mean, he was a guy that, he didn't want anybody giving him orders what to do. I mean, he would have driven a nurse crazy or a doctor crazy. So this was a way for him to go, and thank God. We thank God for letting him go that way. We miss him terribly, and he was a great influence on his kids. Of course, he was an attorney, so he's got 2 attorneys and 2 teachers. Jeff's one, and then the youngest is a teacher in South America. He's in Columbia, South America. He's the principal of the school, at the American school there. So 2 teachers and then lawyers. Lawyers and teachers I got out of the bunch.
That's the way to go. Yeah.
And they have just been so proud and so fortunate to have those kids. They're just absolutely terrific.
Yeah. Well, if you would look back on your life, what would you say would be the most important thing?
Well, I've felt blessed to have had such a wonderful life. I couldn't have asked for a better life. I've had a great childhood with my parents. I had a fortune. I lived in this country and was able to do anything that I wanted, and that I had this talent which allowed me to do things I never would have thought of being able to do. Had a very nice marriage, and I'm glad that he went quickly when he did. It would have been nice to have had him around longer, but it was great, and he gave me these 6 terrific kids. So
How old is it when your husband died?
he was, let's see, he was an attorney in Edmonds. He was on city council and did all kinds of things, and he was a doer all the time, projects around there. He built the Yost Pool, the Driftwood Theater. He didn't build them, but he started the fund to raise money for both projects. And he loved doing those kinds of things for his community. And all my kids, it turned out, I don't know about Jeff, but I think that he's happy as a clam up there doing what he does.
Yeah,
He's
Mr.
wonderful.
Bennett,
He's wonderful.
dude does his job. He knows it.
Yeah. Oh,
He's got us here, man.
Yeah.
Doing this. This is all Bennett.
yeah. I figured it was probably his idea.
Definitely fast.
Yeah.
Would you say it's your children that is the most important
Yeah,
thing?
my children were my greatest accomplishments, I think. people would say, don't you think it's your art? I said, no, that's number two.
Yeah.
My first is my marriage and my family, my kids. And other than losing my daughter, I've been very fortunate with the kids too. They've all been wonderful teachers and attorneys, and with a tremendous sense of responsibility to this life and to do the best you can, and wanting to give back and making a difference in what they do. And they took that after their father, who was very much involved in the community and being of service wherever he could. He was always bringing kids home. In the law practice, he'd find out some parents were splitting, they didn't want the kid and everything, so he'd bring them home.
Okay, so we're about to sum this up. I'm going to ask you a personal question.
Sure.
What is your perception on what happens when you die? Do you fear death?
Did I fear death?
What do you think happens really when
I don't have any fear of it. I think about it, of course, living in a place like this.
Yeah.
You know. And I remember when I've lived here since January. I fell and found out I have an irregular heartbeat. Didn't hurt myself, but it meant that it could happen again. So I had a pacemaker put in, and so they shipped me here. So all of a sudden I woke up from the hospital. They kept me a day, and then when they left, we came here. And Jeff and all the kids had moved me in, all my furniture. Didn't have to do anything. I tell you, my greatest accomplishment is my family. I've been so proud of all of them. They have all been very giving in whatever they did. They wanted to do a good job, and they felt a responsibility.
I gotta say, I'm sure a lot of them benefited a lot of people too.
Well, I couldn't be
teachers
more.
and lawyers.
Yeah.
I couldn't be more proud of them.
You did your job more than
Yeah, I know. They really. I just couldn't be happier with them. And they're all very different. Each one is quite different from the next one. I don't know if you've ever met the other ones, whether.
Fortunately, I'm not. No.
Well, see, I still work, believe it or not. Well, I don't work, but they think they call it work. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, the secretary to my boys down in Edmonds, who are attorneys, Bennett and Bennett, and I work in the office as a receptionist, Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays from 9 until noon. And then the secretary brings me home here, takes me shopping if I need something at the store, and then drops me off. And I always apologize. I'm so sorry you had to bring me home, and all that, because they don't want to let me drive, you see, because of this thing. So she said, oh no, this is my recess. So she brings me home. And that's fine. And then I'm with all these other people. It sounds terrible, but our next step is we're all going to die.
Yeah.
And we're very much aware of it.
Yeah.
But we make the most of it. And it's amazing what you can learn from other people who have been through a full life, too. And you're not surprised when you go down and there's a desk down there that has pictures of the people who are to hear this week. And at first it's a little intimidating. You know, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
When they dropped me off in the hospital and here, and this is a retirement home. And I remember opening the door and seeing this lady walking down the hall with crutches. And I said, my God, now I'm one of them. And here I am. I haven't anything to do with it, but here I am. You might as well enjoy it,
Yeah, I'm sure age just must
Oh,
hit
yeah.
you in the face one day.
And
Like, wow.
I don't have, knock on wood, I don't have any ailments. I'm going to die, I hope, I just wake up one morning and don't feel well and I'll just drop dead. Well, that's fine. I don't think about it. But, every week somebody's passed away.
Yeah.
But you just accept it. And living in a retirement home is